already got people pouring in. Awesome.
Pouring? 3 people
pouring, absolutely pouring.
pouring.
Awesome. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's a special one today. This is going to be really a lot of information and a lot of good, I think, helpful information. So thank you all for joining us today. We're just going to wait just a little bit, not very long, to let people kind of come in and get settled. But yeah, so this is Scanning, Sculpting, and Gravity Sketch with Nick Graveley. So this is going to be a good one. We're going to be in VR for most of the time, and so we're just going to chat and for just a little bit. But then we're going to jump into VR and have a look at all the great work that Nick's been doing. We're going to dive into a lot of workflows regarding sculpting, traditional ways of working, scanning, machine data, and all that kind of stuff. So you might have a lot of questions. We definitely encourage you to ask your questions in the question button so that we can answer them. Don't just write it in the chat. If you could actually ask it in the question button, that'll be really helpful. Also, it's helpful for us because we can refer to those later if we didn't get to any questions that we couldn't answer. So please put those questions in the question, like the Q&A box here. Yeah, we can see which ones have been answered. We also have our product specialist or product expert, Nico, spotting the questions. So he'll be answering if we can't get to them. So yeah, thank you everybody that's been hopping on here. Looks like we've got a number of people on. So yeah, welcome everyone. Again, this is Scanning, Sculpting, and Gravity Sketch with Nick Graveley. And I'll just introduce myself. My name is Jaron Dorman. It says Gravity Sketch. I'll probably just change that. But my name is Jaron Dorman. I'm the design community manager at Gravity Sketch. And I get to connect with all of you out there that use Gravity Sketch and doing all the amazing things. I came across Nick's work a couple of years ago with just the amazing stuff he's been doing with motorbikes and sculpting, but merging into this new way of working. So I'll let him talk about all that and get into the details of that. But first off, I also want to say this webinar will be available afterwards as well. That's another big question we get a lot. So we will be sharing this afterwards. And if you missed it, it will be available. So we also have a special guest with us as well. He will be appearing later on when we get into a little bit of conversation. He'll be joining the conversation with us. And so make sure to stick around, sit in your seats and see who it is. If you miss it, it's fine. You know, it's recorded. So I just want to say too, before we really dive in, actually, first, let me shoot it over to you, Nick, so you can say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to see about people having motorcycles in their office as well. You have to take care of them at this time of year. Bring them in for the winter and take care of them and stuff. So yeah, it's great to be here. I'm really happy to have been asked to do this and share my experiences of such an amazing tool. So yeah, thanks for coming.
Sweet, yeah, always a pleasure to talk to you, Nick. So I just want to say, if any of you are joining that aren't familiar with Gravity Sketch, I just want to briefly say, explain like what it is. Essentially, Gravity Sketch is a 3D creative tool that is on a VR platform. We are supported on Oculus as well as Vive and a number of different headsets, pretty much all the major headsets out there that you can get. We also have an iPad app as well that we are currently still working on and always working on developing. But the VR app is probably like the flagship platform that Gravity Sketch is on. And so essentially the whole philosophy behind Gravity Sketch is getting your ideas out of your mind and into 3D as quickly as and as seamlessly as possible. So, it's really as simple as that. So the tools and functions, UI is carefully thought out and designed to get menus out of the way and just allow you to create with your hands, which I think relates to what we're going to be talking about today with the sort of the tradition of sculpting and bringing it into the digital way of working. But without further ado, I will just kick it over to you, Nick. If you would just want to talk about like your background and like, who you are and maybe explain just like what you do and how you got into all this. Yeah.
Sure thing. Well, yeah, thanks a lot, Jaron. And thank you so much for everyone for these really nice messages that you're posting. This is, it's kind of a nerve-wracking thing for me to kind of be publicly talking about this kind of this stuff. But it's a great opportunity. And I think it's important that we talk about it because it's such an important new thing that we have at our disposal. But for those of you guys who don't know me, and let me give you a little bit of information. My name is Nick Graveley. I have been predominantly contract clay modeler for the last 15 years or so. Prior to that, I'd worked as a motorcycle designer. I started my career at TVS Motor Company in India, which was a great experience, but it was one that taught me that I much prefer expressing myself through physical clay modeling than through sketching. And so basically, yeah, for the last 15 years, I've been contracting. The last 10 or so of those have been exclusively motorcycles. And yeah, I absolutely love motorcycles. As you can probably tell behind me, yeah, everything about motorcycles I love. So being able to work on something that I love, and actually it's quite a complex challenge as well compared to the car work. So car work I find very much just sculptural moving lines up and down, whereas motorcycles is a much more involving topic. There's user requirements, engineering. It's a very dynamic thing. So it's a much more interesting topic for me. So I've always gravitated towards something that's more interesting. In all this, I've actually found, as much as I love clay modeling, and I do genuinely 100% love it. I mean, it's been the best career so far that I could hope for. But there are some shortcomings in it, and I think anyone who's a clay modeler could probably accept those. And hopefully, as I go forwards and kind of lay it out for you, you'll be able to you'll agree on what I'm talking about, and then we'll talk about what the solution is. It's kind of with a little bit of trepidation that I go into this, because I will talk about clay being past its heyday, and so I know it's a topic which is absolutely sacrosanct, and people have when digital first emerged some years ago, and was supposed to be the death knell for clay, and it never happened, and people were like, aha, screw you, digital. Well, actually, now it may just be that clay is being superseded by digital, because the VR tools now are actually so good. So please don't hate me if I'm saying some things about clay that you reject. Hopefully bear with us, or bear with me. And then maybe by the end, if you're not on board with it, it will at least pique your interest enough to go and seek out an opportunity to put on a VR headset and see what I'm talking about, because it's something that you can't, it's almost impossible to describe it. It's something that you have to experience. Here it is again. Look, this happened in our last podcast. Do you remember when I was literally talking? I was talking about my first experience with Gravity Sketch on VR, and it literally puts my hairs on end every time I think about it, because it was such a pivotal moment. And nobody forgets their first time. It's so like so many things in life, or a few things in life, but a few wonderful things in life. So yeah, I don't know what should we do? Should we go straight into Gravity Sketch?
Yeah, I think so I think you had some things you just wanted to show in VR initially, and then so why don't we just go ahead and hop over into that, and just give us a moment to transition here.
Okay, I'm going to change my microphone to my headset microphone and share my screen. Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. Do you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great.
You can hear me well. Great, maybe an overstatement, but I'll take it.
You sound fantastic.
Thank you, Jaron. Thank you, Jaron. Okay, well, so what I'll do to start with would actually run you through a project. Well, so as you see, I've got quite a few bikes here, so we've got to get moving. But first, what I wanted to do was talk about a project that was actually one of the very first projects that I did. And this was for a very talented electric motorcycle engineer, Brian Wisman. I know you're watching, Brian, because I saw your comment earlier on. So thanks a lot for joining. And, actually, thanks a lot for the opportunity to do this. So Brian, I know Brian through working for when I worked for Zero Motorcycles. He's working there, but this is kind of his side project. And actually, it's an electric race bike, which is currently embarrassing a lot of gas bikes over in the States in the races that it's taking part in. And I actually managed to convince my friend Fabien Rougemont, who is also an incredibly talented designer, to actually come and turn out some sketches for me. And this was basically for Fabien and I. This was kind of our kind of first experience in seeing what we could do in Gravity Sketch together. Let's turn off this. Sorry, so get rid of that notice there on my hand. So as you can see, that's a beautiful sketch over there, and we can import the engineering package here. And essentially, what the way I work is, if we look at the sketch, is everywhere where there's a surface inflection, we'll put a line. And then that kind of defines these breakpoints that actually you will see here on the model over here. So these each one of these lines defines a surface inflection, and so we use those lines actually as a very quick way of developing the design and actually tweaking it. And we can grab lines like this, and we can pull them out. Whatever. These are actually not too bad. These actually follow the surfaces, but it gives you a very quick way of iterating the design and trying out ideas. Now let me turn on the there's clearances. So there's the lines, and this is actually these are the surfaces that actually are skinned up over that wireframe there. I'm not going to go too much into depth with this, because actually we're going to talk about the problems with the current process and what this addresses, and we'll come back to this in a bit. But let me just show you, like, one of the beauties is, we can turn on the full bump clearances. I've got clearances around the radiator here, so you can see here. Look, there's actually there'll be about a 7 or an 8 mil clearance gap there, and so if I can see that coming through the surface, as you can see it just sneaking through the surface here, which means that we are basically just on surface. So that clearance there encompasses the desired air gap plus the material thickness. And that's something that we do in clay, but we normally put wax over a hard part, and then we work the clay back until we hit the wax. And so it's kind of that kind of a thing. But unfortunately, during the clay, if the engineer ever changes the package, then we're stuck. Whereas this one, if the engineer changes the package, we can actually update, and work to the latest information. So, oops, sorry, just turn that off. Let's turn that. So I can actually I'll just turn off the surface contours for a second, so you can actually kind of see what it looks like. Now, unfortunately, this project is totally on a budget, because it's a passion project. It was a passion project for Fabien and I. It's a passion project for Brian. So which means, unfortunately, there's no opportunity to go into to actually do a clay verification process. But turn this onto that. But actually, the ability to be actually seeing this in full scale, so you see now that's 100%, is I can actually I will stand up. And actually, I can actually walk around this bike and really appreciate it as a volume in front of me. So anyway, like I said, I don't want to go too much into the details, but let me just step over now here. I've got a very messy flow chart here, and sorry for that, but people who've worked with me may feel that is characteristic of my working style. So where are we down? Here we go. Here, process. So this is laying out what is a typical design development process. Let's leave this open. Now, the starting point is always the design brief, which will come from marketing or whatever, and they'll say, okay, we need to make this bike, and that will go across to the designer, who's then going to use that design brief to start sketching, and there'll be a sketch program, and ultimately one design sketch will be chosen. That sketch is then normally translated into a poly model, which is basically just to say it's not NURBS modeling like in Alias. It's a very quick model using sub-D in the same way that Gravity Sketch uses sub-D. And that will be the designer working with a digital modeler to actually create milling surfaces. So once they've actually created a three-dimensional model, like what I just showed you over there with the light fighter, they can actually then go and build up a clay model and then mill those surfaces into the clay model. That'll be then presented and assessed, and then this is typically where I would join a program as a clay modeling contractor, and there could be, it varies dramatically on the budget on the client, but you know, something like a 6 to 12 week clay refinement process. And during that process, you'll be scanning very occasionally to go to the engineers. The engineers will then give you some feedback, and ultimately you'll end up with a final clay concept. And that clay concept is supposed to be kind of the epitome of the sketch. And actually, then that is ultimately scanned and sent across to the engineers, so they can have a really good look at it and tear it apart. And they'll spend a good couple of weeks putting together an entire package of data that is then fed back to the clay modeling team to actually then go on with the second clay model, which is where they take all of that feedback. And so, you know, for example, the engineers might say, okay, we have not got enough steering lock, so when you're a full lock, the switches are actually too close to the fuel tank, and so we need you to give more relief around the fuel tank and such like, or the fuel volume is not high enough, etc., etc. Hopefully, a lot of you viewing will be familiar with this process. So anyway, so then the second loop of the clay model is done. This is all the refinement to the point where the final clay is then presented. Hopefully, it's accepted and signed off to then actually go into the next step of the development, which will be like an Alias A-class loop. This is a very rough, you know, every company's got a different version. You know, there might be 3 clay models or such like, but this is just a rough process. Now, what I'm going to do is go through this process and talk about the issues that I've seen and experienced in the process. And then we'll run through, we'll figure out all the issues. Then I'm going to go back to the beginning, and then I'm going to tell you why Gravity Sketch actually negates all of these issues, and actually why it's absolutely the thing that we should all be doing. So first thing. So 2D sketch. So 2D sketching alone is an incomplete basis for choosing a key sketch. The great thing that Gravity Sketch are doing, they're really pushing to designers to get into Gravity Sketch, and that is addressing this problem already. So yes, there is already designers who are sketching in 3 dimensions, and so it means that the design that they're coming up with is already better. So that's already great. That's already starting to be addressed. This is not a problem for me. This is before when I get involved. Excuse me. The second problem in the process, I find, is that the process of developing a poly model with a designer and a digital modeler has some fundamental flaws in it. The first of those being the poor perspective of being on a flat screen. You don't have a sense of scale or presence of that model, and actually, you know, the designer is always restricted of only the view on the monitor of whatever the modeler is particularly working on in that moment. So that's not ideal. There's also poor communication. So it's kind of this the kind of playing telephone where he's going, oh, you see that line there? Can you push that point in a bit? You know, and he's drawing sketches to try to get his perspective across to someone. So there's this kind of there's a disjoint between one person's understanding and the next guy's interpretation of that. This process doesn't leverage the skills of physical modelers. Now, physical modelers, clay modelers, have spent their entire careers building up the skills of understanding how to go from a 2D sketch to a three-dimensional object. Now, I'm not saying anything bad about digital modelers here. There are some incredibly talented digital modelers out there, and the guys who do Alias do a lot of fine work, and they do have great understanding, but it's not quite the same understanding, I think, about as someone who's actually spent tens of thousands of hours building something, it not quite working, changing it, rebuilding it, and that iterative process that actually builds up your brain, your neural network, and actually teaches you intuitively how to actually make something that is going to be great in 3 dimensions. Clunky menus-based interface, I don't know if there are any clay modelers out there listening to this who have also tried to go down the journey of learning Alias as thinking that, okay, clay seems to be going away. Let's start to get these digital tools under our belts. And soon, for me personally, it was I think I spent after a week, and that was it. I found it so clunky. It was so inhibiting to the creative process that actually I ultimately didn't want to do it. Even if I got good at doing it, it wouldn't be something that would be interesting for me as a job. So next thing, sorry, I'm belaboring the points a little. The unexpected output from the mill. Every time these milling surfaces are built up and milled, I don't know of a single time that, using this traditional process, that is, that the output from the mill has actually looked the way that we thought it was going to look. And there's generally quite a lot of disappointment, I think, and it's it's useful. It puts the clay roughly in the right place, so we can start like what is a normal 6 to 12 week clay refinement process, where you're going to get a clay modeler working directly with the designer to actually refine those surfaces up by hand. However, the 6 to 12 clay process has quite a few flaws in it, I have found. It's highly labor intensive, okay, which means it takes a long time. So it's slow, and which means that a designer has the opportunity to make a lot less changes. And a design never got finished because the designer said, "Oh, wow, that's it, that's the perfect solution." No, they ran out of time. So you give a designer more opportunity to try things, actually the output is going to be that much better. It's messy. We get shouted at a lot by facilities managers for trekking clay into the kitchen or wherever. It's it's not ideal. There's lots of waste. So if you're following a process of loading up clay and milling, and then maybe you're even saying, okay, right, we're going to leverage the desktop digital process again, and we're going to go back and we're going to fix it again, and then you mill it again, and then again it's not quite what you thought, but there's a lot of clay on the floor, so it must be progress, right? Well, there's a lot of waste that goes, that's energy, and it's not ideal to have so much waste materials, because it's very expensive as well. You need a physical location. You need a location that's, so you need the modelers to be local. So I've spent a lot of my career traveling around between, different countries and such like, because I'm a specialist in what I do, which is great. It's nice to be wanted. But it does involve me traveling away from my family. And, now I've got a wife and 2 kids. That's not what I want to be doing. It's great for a while, but it's not forever. And so, then the clients, maybe if they can't attract talent to come to do the job, they're very much restricted to the guys who are locally available. And that may not, they may not have the skills that you want. You need a bespoke, secure facility. So data security is very important. And it has to be built out with coordinate measuring machines and steel plates and such like. That's an expensive proposition. It's hard to get all the stakeholders together To get everyone in the same place at the same time, nobody late, nobody cancelling, blah blah blah. That's a challenge. And obviously during the pandemic, which we are now, actually a lot of clay models have been completely cancelled because of the fact that you can't take a clay model home. So that's a problem. This to me is the greatest problem, is the information gap between the engineers and the clay. So if you're working on a motorcycle, which is essentially it's a rolling piece of engineering, maybe a car, maybe people might push back against this, but a car is a little bit more of a rolling sculpture over a piece of engineering. But within a motorcycle particularly, the engineering is absolutely integral to the styling. And so you've got this kind of what's going on in clay is over here, and the engineers are working on the last bit of data they got from the clay, and then they're going to feed back some information to the clay for that to be implemented. And so the frequency with which the data can be extracted and sent to the engineers is an impediment. But also the engineering feedback which is given to the clay modeler is also difficult to implement, because they maybe give you like a point sheet. It feels so archaic to go to an engineer and then to write down on a piece of paper 50 points, 50 XYZ coordinates. You then go to a coordinate measuring machine and spend 2 hours dotting in and then putting some Tipex in and scraping back to. I mean, it's so archaic. It's such an archaic way of working. But it's all that, it's all you've got right now. All the surfaces are brown. Okay, a thing like a motorcycle has, glossy painted surfaces, black surfaces, silver surfaces, translucent surfaces. On a clay model, you've only got brown, which is not ideal. Okay, you put Dynoc on it every so often. That's great. But it really transforms a model. Once you put the Dynoc on it, it's a completely different bike. And so it's beautiful. It's a wonderful surprise, but it's a surprise that you shouldn't have to experience, because you should be working on it in a fully informed way all the way up to the point that you see it in color. And skin deep only. Skin deep only means that you're only working on the outer surface. And so the things that I've been able to do, and you'll see this on the next bike that I'm going to show you, you can actually really start drilling down conceptually just into like how panels go together, how one panel will go underneath another panel, and actually that presents a lot of solutions. You can get the engineer can actually come in and you can talk about stuff, mounting concepts and stuff. It's amazing, but we'll get into that. So better communication than poly. So you're going to be is in clay. It's better, but it's not ideal. So they're putting tapes on, but if there's not enough material, they're putting little blobs of clay to put a tape over the top of it and make it float in the air. It's not exactly the designer saying the tape should be exactly like this. There are great things. So you can see the tangible thing in front of you and you can appreciate its presence. You can see it with your human perspective, which is absolutely what you want. Great for ergonomics checking, certainly in the case of a motorcycle. And yeah, most of all, it's actually very fun, and it's a great way to earn a living. Now, oh gosh, time is running. I need to do speed up. Right. So the scan research is required to give an engineer useful data. Right. So yeah, that's a whole other step. So once you make the scan, it's only cloud point data, and actually engineers really need surfaces to start working on the feedback. So that's another thing that needs doing. And then once they do feed you back and you start on clay model 2, you've got the same issues as you had in the first clay model. Yeah, that's it. But listen, let's go back up to the top, and I'm going to talk to you very quickly. I understand that we've got very little time here, and I have to tell you why this is amazing. So, poor perspective on a flat screen. We got that solved because we're in 3 dimensions. We actually see things in front of us as if it's floating in the air in front of us. So that's good. That's what we've got now in Gravity Sketch. Poor communication. That's sorted as well, because the designer and the designer can actually come in and draw lines. He can grab that line. He can tune that line. He can look around that line in any way he wants and say, you know what, this is how it should be. And I want, you know, you follow exactly that line. So there's great communication. It leverages the skills of physical modelers. I am absolutely advocating for this being clay modeling 2.0. Okay, clay modelers, your industry is dying. Okay, you need to get into this. Okay, please, please, please do this, because this is going to be the future. Okay, and you've got so much knowledge in your brain about how to actually go from a two-dimensional sketch to a three-dimensional object. You need to make use of that, and actually they're putting that aside every time when they're milling out a clay, or they're using you know, these very well-intentioned digital modelers to make these poly models. They're not actually leveraging that kind of those skills. So this is solved because this is a very low bar to entry. 350 euros is it for a VR headset, and the Gravity Sketch is free. Like, give it a go, get into it. Okay, clunky menus based interface. Sorry, clunky menus based interface, I should say. Yeah, this is absolutely not. This is the most beautifully intuitive thing. If I want to move around something, it's one button and a hand gesture. Everything falls to my hand. It is amazing. You'll see that as we go on. Unexpected output from the mill. We've been using this for the last year now, and we've done the development in Gravity Sketch, and then the typically a couple of week clay milling, and then final refinement, surface refinement process. And when you mill that clay out, it is absolutely no surprise. It looks exactly the way you saw it in here. There is no surprises at all. And in that way, when you get to the clay, you're not making any design decision, you're not really changing any design decisions, because they've all been made in here. All you're going to be doing is making those very, very fine surface refinements, because this is poly modeling, and you know, we can get pretty good. There's a zebra shader, but we can't get perfect. So yeah, labor intensive. This is fun. It's labor intensive, but it's a lot faster. Okay, it's not messy. There's no waste. The pixels, you know, don't lay on the floor. It's all fine. No physical location needed. I walk down the stairs in the morning and I get into my armchair and I work. It's amazing. Like, so I can work anywhere in the world for any client. And as a client, you know, as a company, you can actually then start to access this pool of talent that lies beyond your borders, or beyond where, you know, whoever can get a visa to come and work in your country. The bespoke secure facility, Gravity Sketch have got that covered. And I actually was asking Gravity Sketch the other day about what is the level of their data security, and they actually were telling me that it's so TIXAS is the TÜV-SÜD specification for data security for the automotive industry, and Gravity Sketch's infrastructure meets this, and they're currently going through the paperwork to actually become fully certified in that. The data is encrypted, so when you work in collab, it's fine if you're working on your own. You can work completely offline as well. But if you're working in collab, which means you're connected and you're working on the Gravity Sketch servers, and so, you know, I'll typically be working in here. When we were working on the Light Fighter, Fabienne was sitting in the UK. When we're working on that, you know, we're working through an entirely encrypted network. And pandemic sorted. Don't have to worry about that. Stay inside, stay safe. The info gap between engineers and clay, so we can have as much back and forth with the engineers as we want. Engineers can come in here and we can really, really zoom in on problems, talk about suggestions. Motorcycle designers are not just stylists. They often have incredibly good suggestions about how to solve engineering problems. And actually being able to be in this environment with an engineer and have those guys you know, talk about solutions to those problems, it's absolutely a seamless communication, and it leads to better results. In frequent scans, you can, you know, exporting from this as a DODL, you can export as an IGES or OBJ or FBX, and so those engineers can use that data, and they can use it directly because it's already in a useful format like IGES. Engineering feedback's very easy to implement because we just drag it in here when we put our surfaces around it. all the surfaces are not brown. All the surfaces are beautifully rendered. In fact, we can't have it here. We can't have an HDRI here, but we can actually have an HDRI environment when we're offline and in our own sort of private room, which is amazing. And so you can actually, you have beautiful reflections of the model, and you can actually, you split it up by the color and texture that you want. Skin deep only, I think I touched on that to say that, we can actually, work in full 3 dimensions. I'll show you that later on. And of course, we leverage all of these positive things too. We've got the great communications because you can make your own lines. You can see the tangible thing and appreciate its presence. If you've not used VR, you don't understand it. If you've used VR, perhaps you understand it. What we're looking at is my brain understanding there being a physical thing in front of me. End of, that's it. There is a physical thing in front of you when you're in this room, as far as your brain is concerned. True human perspective, exactly that. Ergonomics checking. Okay, yeah, we can do that a little bit. We can do here. Look, we got a guy here, and we can go in and we can look right in here and we can check. Okay, look, that looks like kind of comfortable. Look, his chest is sticking through there a little bit. But generally it looks pretty good. Maybe we can do this. We can check that when he's leaning off. Okay, where's his leg going to touch? All right, his leg's touching there. Is that uncomfortable? I don't know. So, but that's all going to come because we put that. We still ideally want to do a clay modeling phase, and so So I advocate for all of this happening in Gravity Sketch, and then a clay verification phase at the end. And now, hopefully, you've stuck with me that whole way. And I don't know. I think the best thing to do now is to actually hand over to someone who was skeptical and has now been through this process and is fully on board with it. And he's a guy. So this is kind of our special guest here this evening, and he's a guy who, for 13 years, was the design director for Kiska Design in Salzburg, and he was actually the guy who led the design of 2 of the most iconic brands, KTM and Husqvarna. And he's a friend, he is a colleague, and I'm really pleased to introduce you guys to Craig Dent. So if I lift up my headset here, hopefully Craig Dent will magically appear. Here he is. Hi, Craig.
I'm here, Nick. Hello. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you great. Fantastic. So do you want to just tell us a little bit about your experience with Gravity Sketch and kind of the revelations that you've had?
Sure.
So I hand over to you.
Thank you. I mean, what an honor. To be honest, I'd prefer it to be a conversation with you, Nick, because that's when the magic happens, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Nick. And what a stunning introduction that you just gave us. Actually, me too, because I never had an introduction to Gravity Sketch like you just gave us all just now. You said some big things there, Nick. You said some. There were some major statements in there.
Oh, Nick, your microphone's still in the headset, just so you know.
I've just changed it. Can you hear me?
There you go. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Carry on.
So yeah, thanks for the introduction, Nick. For those of you that know me, yes, indeed, I've been in this industry for quite a while. It's been 18 years in total now, dabbling in motorcycle design, and had the honor, and what an amazing time with Kiska, as you pointed out, the last 13 years. And I think we created some incredible things with that fantastic team in Salzburg. Yes, Nick, you pointed out some things that are very poignant to me. So I'm in love with everything that's on 2 wheels, anything that you can ride. And the reason for this is this whole 2-wheel space is so emotionally involving. That a bike, whether it be a bicycle, something in the e-mobility space, all the way through to motorcycles, it's an extension of the rider, and the emotional interaction that you have as a rider. I've never found it anywhere else. in life. So for me, it's just it's the thing, it's the one, isn't it? And I think this is why Nick is so successful in this whole two-wheel thing, because you can feel, Nick, you can feel your energy and enthusiasm for this world just like spilling out constantly when you're talking. And actually, it's also why it's so wonderful to work with you as often as we do, because these days we spend quite a lot of time together, and actually we spend a lot of time together in a digital environment in Gravity Sketch. Indeed. And the strange thing about this is I feel like I see you nearly every day, and actually we're 2 hours apart, and it's quite bizarre. It's quite surreal thinking, when was the last time I actually saw you in reality? It's been a while, but what an enabler this whole thing is turning out to be. And what you just pointed out, Nick, about myself, me being, what did you say, skeptical?
Is that unfair accusation? I don't know. I mean, I think I certainly didn't introduce you to Gravity Sketch, did I? But no. I don't know that you'd experienced the level to what I think it's capable of doing or bringing to modeling. Yeah, absolutely not.
It's blown my mind, actually. The last couple of months, it's been an incredible journey, and the reason for this is change in life normally triggers fear in people. And design, we're in design. Design is about finding new ways, isn't it? It's about finding new ideas, and it's about improvement, and it's about simplification and making things better, making lives better. And I think this challenging the fear of change is our responsibility. It's actually exactly what you're doing today. And as I said, you've said some very controversial things, and you made some big statements, and you're going to get a kickback there, that's for sure. Yeah, because this with and you're talking to me as somewhat as a traditionalist, because I love clay. I've always loved clay. The tangibility, the fact that you've got an object between your hands, the fact that it's so interactive, you've got the physical interaction, the emotion is there. And I'll always love this. And actually, I've always fought with exactly the same issues that you pointed out. Now, I wouldn't talk down I wouldn't talk too much about the negatives of the clay process. Yes, of course, it's physical, and of course you have to. Some amazing points in there about not finding the physical boundaries with the package, for example, offsets, all of these things. Absolutely. What was so interesting about when we started working together more closely, I mean, we've worked together previously, of course, doing clay models before, which was always fun. It all came now at exactly the right time, didn't it? Because suddenly we find ourselves all stuck at home and not in studios and scattered around the world. And I'm sure, like in my experience, so many studios and so many design teams really struggled to find ways to progress on projects. And then due to some of our new collaborations, we found ourselves in Gravity Sketch in digital rooms. And I couldn't believe the speed in which we were able to turn traditional sketchwork, emotional sketchwork, into emotional models that you could interact with fully. And then not just have a model on the screen, but being fully immersed in it with a designer, with an engineer, with a modeler, with a client, doing client presentations where clients are also hundreds of kilometers away, where we all were. There were, I think, 5 or 6 of us in this presentation. We're all scattered around Europe. And it was as if we're all in the same room, no, multiple rooms. I mean, the thing that the designers created in this instance was a environment walkthrough presentation with multiple rooms so that we could really bring our client through the whole design process. And it's mind-blowing. It's absolutely mind-blowing. And so when you spoke about me being a critic, I certainly was. And I think the first model that we dabbled with together, I was very hesitant about it. It's brilliant to be able to catch up with you guys. The the designer and you, the modeler, and to really to be able to bring in design impact and input and help you guys towards a design goal from afar. But I have to say, I was pretty skeptical of how the clay would come out. And I sat there and thought, let's see what happens. And then after a couple of weeks of modeling and witnessing you modeling and being able to help there, hitting the go button, and a week later visiting you in your clay workshop and seeing a milled clay in front of me that was shockingly close to the perception that I had in Gravity Sketch. That was pretty scary. And if we now go back to years before, this was always probably the biggest issue throughout the whole design process, from briefing to A-class delivery. Exactly that phase, the translation from preliminary CAD model, bit poly model, blender model, whatever, into a milled physical model. That was always the big hole. And Gravity Sketch is definitely helping to fill that hole. The perception between a digital model and the physical model, that gap is definitely closed massively. So that's been super, super exciting for me to be involved in that with yourself. And it's just a start. Now, I would definitely never say this is the be all and end all. And I don't see it so black and white, but I'm also an advocate of pushing things forward and finding new ways in this improvement. But just to see how fast things are improving now, phenomenal. So it's not there, it's not perfect. The resolution sometimes, there's so many drawbacks as well, but it's been such an enabler over the last couple of months. And I'm just so excited. If we're this far already now, where we're going to be in 5 years' time, that's exciting.
Yeah, no, that really is truly exciting. Yeah, I mean, already there's actually headsets that are, you know, the lenses are already better than your eyes, you know, so actually that will trickle down and become commercially affordable, and so then once actually what you can see is as good as resolution as you can see with your eyes, I mean, that's going to be another level. So yeah, but already the resolution's very, very good. And it's definitely usable. But yeah, cool. Thanks a lot, Craig. I really, really appreciate you joining us to talk about that.
Absolutely.
And yeah, you're absolutely right. And thanks for calling me out so that nobody else has to on all the bold statements I've made. Please. But if you do want to email me, you can email me at spam@claymoto.com. So yeah, all right. Well, let's. If it's all right with you, Jared, shall I dive back into Gravity Sketch, or you want to say something
real quickly? We mentioned data security earlier, so before it gets too far away from us, I did want to ask, just put up a quick poll on that if you want to receive more information on data security, if you're curious. Also, we'll have another poll after this too. I think. What do you think? Is it a good time to ask too how many clay modelers are out there listening and watching?
That would be interesting. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we can figure that out.
And Jaren, we have a question from Oliver Webb. I think that would be a good thing to take right now as well.
Yeah, shoot.
So Oliver's asking, so when he started automotive design at university, I wanted to be a clay modeler. Since finding Gravity Sketch, I fall in love with it after struggling with Alias and Blender. What advice do you have for final year students building a portfolio and wanting to enter the industry as a clay and VR modeler?
Practice. Just get into it. Practice. Build stuff. Keep building stuff. Keep failing. Keep building. Keep failing. And yeah, that's it. Yeah, obviously hindsight's a wonderful thing. When I left university, I had no idea of all the stuff I didn't know, and so like everyone, I went out into the world confident that I knew everything, and then sooner or later I realized I knew nothing, and had to crash back down into the kind of, what do they call it, from the Mount Stupidity down to the Valley of Despair, where you suddenly realize how little you actually know, and then you start to build your knowledge up. So don't go out trying to tell people that you know everything. Go out humbly, looking to learn, and just keep on practicing and keep on practicing, and don't pretend that you know anything. In fact, because mostly everyone else knows something that you probably don't, especially if they've been doing it for some years. Hopefully that answers your question. I'm just going to put my headset back on
go right ahead.
In preparation of going on with the next thing. I don't know if you want to ask another question or something.
Yeah, I just want to. I'll put out this other poll. I'm just curious to find out how many clay modelers we get out there. So I'll put that out there. You know, all this clay talk. It's kind of curious. We're kind of curious to see. But yeah, great questions. So yeah, and please do. You know, ask your questions in the Q&A button at the bottom, and we will get to those. I can try and check it as well, and Nico is going to be monitoring that. So we'll try and get all your questions asked, because we're going to be looking at a few different workflows here in relation to scan data, Gravity Sketch tools, all of that. So
how are we doing for time, really? Like,
so
I think.
Yeah, so we're approaching the last sort of 30 minutes. But I would say that, you know, if it goes a little bit over, that's totally fine, Nick. Don't feel rushed at all. If people need to leave, we totally understand. Again, this is going to be recorded and we're going to share this. So don't feel rushed at all.
Okay, cool. Right, well, let me crack straight on with the next.
I'll join you as well in VR.
Oh, okay, wonderful, cool. So what we're looking at here is a bike called the Hypermono. This was actually another kind of passion project that I took on as a way of learning Gravity Sketch. If you don't like the design, that's okay. I did it. I wasn't working with Fabian on this one. But you know, I don't really typically work as a designer anymore, but I do like to turn my hand at it. And since there was no one actually parting with any money, I thought it would be good to be able to actually have a go at that. It's kind of got an interesting stance because the seat is so low and far back. So as you see, if I turn on the rider, is actually very far back and quite low down. But this is, you know, this is package requirements from the client, Chris Cosentino, who is basically the modern age John Britton, if you know who he is. He's building this bike out of it's a Panigale V2 engine that he's basically used a single cylinder and then built an engine around that single cylinder and then built the entire frame. What's interesting is that it's actually got, let me turn this off again, it's actually got a Hossack front end, or funny front end as people call it. This is kind of quite unique in motorcycles, but this is a racing bike, and Chris believes it will be pretty successful on the track. With that funny front end actually comes quite an interesting technical problem, because we don't have the opportunity to put some structure from the headstock to hold the front fairing. So actually within this, I had to come up with kind of an interesting solution. And because this is Gravity Sketch, and you know, we don't have clay, we don't have big chunks of heavy clay to worry about, we can actually start to look at some of those problems and how to solve them in innovative ways. And so actually what I ended up doing was taking this entire front fairing piece and making it structural. And this is actually between this piece, which joins onto the lower part here, and this mounts onto the frame back here. This actually provides the entire structural integrity for the front end, for the fairing. And that's kind of a thing that you wouldn't happen upon that solution in clay necessarily, or it would be very difficult to integrate that solution. You know, and we've got these little air ducts here to bleed some air into behind the cockpit here, and we can actually get, here we go, we get on 100% here. I can actually sit on the bike and kind of get that rider's perspective from it. But what I kind of want to show you is, let's see, look, here's the clearances. So we were able to bring in that engineering data to check. Look, we got some clearance. Well, we haven't got much clearance, but maybe that needs a bit of an alteration. But we've got full clearance at the front here for the full bump, and this is the radiator exists on one side only. So you'll see here on this side we don't have that extra vent, which is bleeding air into the oil cooler here, and it's very slightly through the surface here, which is symmetrical from the right to the left side. But yeah, I mean that's what do I want to say? The cool thing is, like, of course, we can just grab this stuff, and we can, if we want to tune stuff, we can very easily tune these lines. You pull that in here and do whatever we want. It's very quick to change stuff. Is great, but I don't want to dwell too much on this bike because there's actually quite a lot of stuff, and I actually want to give you guys a little bit of a demo on how I work and some of the other possibilities. Some of you guys might recognize this bike here. This is the BMW R90, which was scanned, and this was scanned using a GOM scanner, and just turn off the clearances here. So you can see, like, we got these assets that we can bring in that are full bump, full lock. I'll just turn those off for now. One thing this was actually a project that I did as a clay model, and I'll just pull that in and run that kind of in the background that you can see that. And this is kind of the old school in my old grotty old workshop that I used to have in Schwabing in Munich. And so this was for a client for Motone Customs in the UK. They wanted to do something, but what we wanted to do was use the original underside of the fuel tank. So we didn't want to change the inside of the fuel tank, and we actually wanted to. I'll just let this play out before I dive into the fuel tank. But we wanted to use the original fuel pump and therefore the original loom and stuff. So this is, you'll note in the video that I'm working against a mirror, and this has actually just saved me having to work on both sides. I've always been trying to look for these kind of like labor-saving devices, these kind of nice little shortcuts to actually get more information and to be more informed of what I'm doing. So look, we can see inside of here, look, this is the original fuel tank inside with the original fuel pump, which is actually positioned here. This is the, where are we? Clay scan. This is the clay scan here. So you can see there's a little bit of corrugated hose, but it's a flexible hose. And that's the clay basically there that was scanned in, which went through an alias process. And so we can import the alias here. And actually, we can actually now turn on the zebra shader if we want to go in and start analyzing that. And I actually find this very useful to actually, when I'm working with alias modelers and we're doing the class A, I'll import the data that they send me into here, because alias is an incredibly expensive tool, and this is a very incredibly inexpensive tool, and I can actually then assess the surfaces in here very nicely. One thing that I probably would have done had we had Gravity Sketch at the time, we would not have gone into to do an alias loop. What I may well have done would have been go from the clay sketch. Well, actually, sorry, if we had this tool, I probably would not have done the clay. But okay, let's just say you're hell bent on doing a clay, and you bring it in here, and you want to make a prototype part. You could actually then use the clay. You can actually use the clay. Where's the alias? I'll turn the alias off. And this is the clay scan. Let's just change the cut. 1 second. This the clay scan should be locked. Oh, sorry. Let me lock these guys. Right. No. What am I doing? What am I doing here? I'm trying to grab that, just that. So they're grouped, that's why.
Someone had a question earlier about layer groups, and so it's, I think, probably relevant to this.
Someone had a question about what, sorry?
Someone just had a question about maybe implementing layer groups in Gravity Sketch. I think it's more of a feature request.
Oh my goodness, yes, please do, please do. Yeah,
I just wanted to say, I think we're looking into that. We're definitely, we're looking to that as a team.
Yeah,
so.
definitely, that will be a very welcome addition. But anyway, you can see very quickly, I can actually build up a sub D version from the clay. And the nice thing is that this super intuitive tool. Like all I have to do is put it into edit mode. Look, I just toggle this across, and now I've got a thicken option, so I can actually thicken this as much as I want. So let's just say we're going to make a 3mm prototype, and then that's it. Literally, if I can isolate that part on its own. Where are we? Sub detail. If I isolate that part, I can now export that part on its own. Jaren, you won't see this, but I only have that part visible to the guys. And that's it. You can then send that to whatever printer. And so that's really amazing to be able to use sub D in that way. And also one thing that's worth noting, which actually is particularly pertinent for the Hypermono now, is that is actually going over to a friend of mine who's a good Alias modeler, but he's also very good with using sub D in Alias, and he's using all of the diagnostic tools of Alias to actually make the sub D model very, very good. And yeah, we did a project with Roland Sands actually, and that it really proved to me that, you know, even though I could make it okay in Gravity Sketch, he could still add another level of refinement to it in Alias by using those surface diagnostic tools. So that's really cool to have that. Now, I'll turn off that sub D. I'll turn on the where are we? Where's my? I've lost my. No, I haven't. There it is. Alias. So now, let's say, for example, that we have this. This is our bike, and I say, wouldn't it be nice to have a front fairing on there? And so, apologies for the sketch. I told you I gave up sketching to do clay modeling, and so that we kind of got this. We did this very, very rough little sketch here about a possible front fairing that could be done. And so I know that should be on this layer. So I'll put that back. Sorry, put that back on the center line here, and it just snaps very nicely onto the center line. And I'm going to show you a little bit of the workflow that I use in order to go from a sketch to actually a physical model, also a physical model of a visual model that appears physical. So what we do is we actually go over all of those lines with actually a line in Gravity Sketch, and then we can actually I can pull all those reference datas in here to make sure that when we start taking those lines and making a three-dimensional mesh, that actually we're respecting those clearances. So the next step on that would be just lock these guys. And now I can actually put that into edit mode. Sorry, not that one, that's staying on the center line. This one and this one, then we can start pulling these lines out, you know, to then start forming the actual shape that we want. And I can use this, I can either move the entire movement of my hand, or I can actually do a proportional movement, so that actually if I just grab it with the edge of that sphere, see how much I move my hand, and so you can do much more slight refinements on those edit points. And so let's see, we're getting to that, and we will turn on. So then look here, if those of you familiar with Blue Peter, here's one I made earlier. And so those lines will actually form the basis of making some surfaces. And you can see that if you're the designer, you can actually come in here and, you know, just do some very fine refinement. You can actually, this is kind of the analogous to looking down the tapes. And one of the points is that rather than making surfaces and then you ending up with intersections from which actually is much of what you read of a design. Actually, in this way, we're starting at the lines, and then we're going to build the surfaces off the lines. And actually, that's a very powerful way of controlling the output to be able to work in that way. And obviously, you can do that in any digital modeling software, but you can't do quite the same kind of gun sighting down the lines that you can in real life or in Gravity Sketch. And so this again is another opportunity for clay modelers to kind of use their skill of understanding about how a line, how an edge should develop as it travels around a model. So here I'll just, so typical service demo. Okay, let me delete that out. That's from an old demo that I did. But I'm going to stay on that layer there, and I will then start to put in some surfaces. We're going to go sub D straight away. We're going to use flat curve, no curvature, because I want to have complete control of it. Actually, you know what? I'm going to start just by pulling this surface out. Oops. Well, it doesn't matter because then we can grab that. You can see how very quickly I can do this stuff. Let me just double check I'm on the right layer. Yes, I am. I'm going to make that silver color here. We can start pulling these surfaces in like this. And so on and so forth. I'm going to, if you look at the end there, if we have enough time, I'm actually going to give you a demo of making a part. But here's one I made earlier, which is we can start. You can introduce an air vent very easily. I'll just show you that very quickly. Look, let's say we wanted to put an air vent in here. We just literally, it's super easy to pull in features or even to pull out features or whatever you wanted to do. It's very intuitive. So let's turn off the sketch. We don't need the sketch anymore. Let's turn off first lines. And you'll see, where's my screen? There's the screen. So look, in a typical clay model, you'd never be able to conceive of how this is going to work underneath with the screen. Okay, you might be able to model this little bit here, but you wouldn't actually be able to really figure out all of this surface in the way that you can here in Gravity Sketch. So that's a really important part, and you can actually really see, you can really look around and appreciate it as if it's a full-size thing in front of you. Turn off these references. You'll see, like here, we've got clearance. In fact, better than that. Look here. I'll grab this part here. This is my fork leg. I'm going to actually put that into edit mode. That's already turned into a sub D object. So normally when you import objects, they are not sub D, but you can turn them into sub D objects. And then I can do a thicken offset here and actually grab that point here. Okay, let's say we want, it's a fork, so let's say we're going to give 10 mil clearance just for safety. Yeah, so that's our clearance surface right there. Yeah, yes, that is. And so we can work to that, which is really useful. Right, let me just. Time is against me.
Doing great, Nick.
Is it all right, Jaron? Okay, great stuff. This is another little project I did. This is based on a Zero FX electric motorcycle. Zero's been a good client of mine for some years, and so I wasn't particularly keen on the way the FX looked. So I did this kind of carbon body kit for it after hours whilst I was working over there in California, and again working against a mirror to be able to just do one side of it and then scan that in in here. And well, I didn't scan it in here, but I scanned it and then actually sent it to a friend who did the alias for me. And hang on. Right, so that's the scan, and then we've got the CAD frame. So then this is the alias body. So this is the alias output from that. Oops, this is clay scan body, and look, you'll see if we put on this zebra shader, we can start to really go in and check those surfaces. You'll see it's if we get right in, you'll see that it's slightly faceted, and that's because we had to turn it into an OBJ in order to import it in here. You can import images. I've had some issues with it, but anyway, at the end of the day, you can get it to work. But more than that, you see, these are the lines, and you know, I think you agree that those lines are very reminiscent of that motorcycle. You know,
yeah,
you don't need the surfaces to understand that is that motorcycle, and that's really one of the most important points. I think is that, you know, when I'm teaching this, is to get students to understand that a three-dimensional object, any three-dimensional object, is made up of surfaces and edges. But the edges, there's edges. Each edge represents a point where the light is changing from light to dark, and those are the things that you read the most. You know, sometimes there's a soft surface, of course, and it's a soft fillet, but there is a beginning and an end to that patch. And so using lines in this way is a very powerful way, a very quick way to see the design and actually to edit the design and try out different things. So, you know, if you then start skinning it up with surfaces, then you have to move an awful lot more edit points. Again, you know, here's an object we can look here. Let's say this is not yet a sub-D object. Look, here we go. I can hit that, turn that into a subdivision object, and now look, it's okay. It's quite complex, but I can thicken it, add an offset, and let's say, okay, this is going to be 2 mil thick carbon. So actually, let's just check this alias body, import the, so there you go, import the alias body, and look, the alias body is bang on the 2 mil clearance. So I know now that bracket here is actually gonna, or my body is gonna sit beautifully on that bracket.
Wow.
Cool. Sorry, Jaron?
I just said, wow.
Oh,
that's the precision.
Thank you.
It's really cool.
Yeah, well, that's the point. It's just really, the tool is so basic feeling, or it's so intuitive that that I think people might even judge it as not being capable of working precisely in, but it's absolutely not the point. You know, a pencil or a pen is a very basic thing, but that doesn't mean you can't do amazing things with it. And so that's really the point of Gravity Sketch. It's so intuitive, it's so easy to use, that, you know, if you've ever tried to go into like learning Alias and one of these tools, we have to know exactly every menu, and it's a nightmare. I mean, this has absolutely none of those impediments to it at all. Right. So I'm going to close by okay, this here. So some of you guys may have seen a video I posted on Instagram and LinkedIn last week, the week before, whenever it was. And actually, this was a custom Suzuki SV650 that I worked on many years ago, and this was done as a clay model, and then I doubled over the clay model. So really an old school way of working, taking fiberglass molds off it, making you know, parts from it, sanding them all down. I mean, it was very labor intensive. May not, wouldn't recommend doing it. I don't think I'd ever do it myself again. Certainly not with these tools available. But anyway, for that I use my Peel 2 scanner, which is an amazing piece of kit. So it looks patchy, but this was I think it was about 7 minutes it took me to scan that entire thing. Of course, you can bring it in here and then add the texture to it later. But the main focus is actually not on the entire thing, but actually what was up here at the front. And so let's go look here. So yeah, so actually I went and did a much more, I did some detailed scan around these mounting points. Still not perfect, but it's perfectly usable. And it's about time on it. If you spend a little bit more time, you capture a little bit more detail. And so yeah, so the current fender.
Nick, we did have a question real quick about your scanning. Greg is asking, do you make your scans watertight? And do you use Gravity Sketch to do that? I've been working that way, though it is admittedly more time consuming.
I do. Well, I don't make my scans watertight because they are, as you see, inherently full of holes, and a motorcycle's got, like a lot of depth to it, which actually the scanner, although incredibly competent, it falls down when you start kind of looking into the holes, just based on the way that the cameras can't look too deeply into the holes. So no, I don't make the scans watertight. I don't need to, but I use. There's Mesh Mixer, which is a free Autodesk tool. You've got Mesh Lab. Mesh Lab I typically use for doing offset surfaces. So the offset tool was quite a recent addition in Gravity Sketch. And you can't trim yet, but Jaron, you make sure you get the guys to do this, to actually be able to trim up imported OBJs to actually, so if I wanted to say just isolate, if I just wanted to isolate this area here and have an offset of that, for example, that would be amazing within Gravity Sketch to be able to isolate that, turn that into an OBJ and offset it. But what was it? Sorry, what was the second part of that question about watertight meshes?
Really, it was just Greg, I think, was just saying that that's what he uses for his workflow at the moment, using Gravity Sketch to make the scans watertight. And so it looks like Mesh Mixer is another option potentially.
I'd be really interested to know. So how he's using Gravity Sketch to make the meshes watertight. That's actually really interesting. If he could post a little bit more on the
looks like
there about that.
Yeah, actually, he says in the next after that says, to be more clear, I'm not referring to retopo, but filling the holes in a high poly scan mesh. I'm splitting the scan into 10,000 selections in Moto and then importing it to Gravity Sketch for sub-D editing.
Okay,
I see. That's how it works. Yeah.
Yeah, 10,000 being the limit of the number of triangles that you can turn something into a sub-D. Yeah, I mean, that's really useful. And, Peel's a great sort of pioneer of scanning. I was talking to them about how we can go directly from scan into Gravity Sketch, and they're really working on some of those things. It will be amazing. We're right at the beginning of this journey, and what's going to be possible in 2, 3, 4 years, we probably can't even conceive of. So I'm really looking forward to that. And but so to come back to this, to what we're doing here, this so the front fender that I've got on this motorcycle, this is a GSXR 750 K5 front end, and so on my actual bike I've got the original front fender, which is it's an enormous thing. I don't think I've got it still in here, but actually it extends all the way forwards like this, and so I've always wanted to do a kind of a smaller fender, and I just plotted out kind of a few lines here just to see how that might look. And what I'm going to do now is just quickly skin this up, hopefully quickly skin this up.
Nick, before you go into actually skinning it up, could you share your UI? If you go down to online users and just switch on the share UI switch.
Sure. Yeah, it's okay.
So you can see your menus too when you're working.
Yeah, no, it's funny. Yeah. I mean, obviously I teach this as well. So I'll just do a quick plug. I do teach Gravity Sketch. You can go to Grav.design, or actually gravitysketchtraining.com will take you there as well, if that's easier to remember. But yeah, so yeah, I'm always teaching people about the interface and such like. But listen, let me get cracking on this, because I don't know that I've got masses of time here. Sorry.
At this point, if anybody has any questions, it's a great time at this point while Nick is building out these surfaces.
One of the questions that we had was Any form development you gentlemen do in the final clay model in any of your projects where you utilize the tactile feel of clay to get an emotional form?
So do I use the clay to like do I find value in the tactile value of clay? Was that?
Yeah, it sounds like that's what the
Yeah.
question was asking.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd be shot if I said anything other than that. But I genuinely do believe that you use their gosh, it's quite difficult to talk and do this. But
Sorry.
if we go to a show, we look at a vehicle in a show, we don't have to touch it to understand it. So touching it is just another way, is a way of understanding what the surfaces are doing at the point that the hang on, I need to think about what I'm doing here. Let's move that down there. That the oh gosh, I can't think and talk.
It's hard.
If you can see it fully rendered. I see I've already made a total hash of that here. Look, because that needs I need an extra edge loop here to do that radius. Yeah. Yeah, if you can see it, then you can understand it. Your human brain is evolved to understand what that form is doing, and so yeah. I've always enjoyed like touching it, but I push back on designers who say that, oh no, I need to be able to touch the surface in order to get it right. I mean, again, I'm sure Craig will call that one of my big sweeping generalization statements. But I'm a modeler, not a designer, so I actually have maybe a slightly different perspective on things. Now,
let's see. This is a question from Alex Minshall. Curious on the process of getting clients in the VR world. What sort of environments have you created when showcasing to clients in Gravity Sketch? Do you try and create a room to showcase the design in, or do you keep it simple? It's a great question, Alex. I think it depends on the meeting or the scenario, but I think more often than not, things definitely warrant some sort of environment. So obviously you've been able to see examples of how you can create geometry in Gravity Sketch. So naturally you could probably see that it's very easy to create spaces in Gravity Sketch as well, which isn't really the focus of the webinar for today, but you can create presentation spaces as well. This is a very basic one, right? We have a floor and that's pretty much it. And then we've got the bikes laid out, but sometimes we do lay out more sort of more full spaces where there's walls, and then we'll have models organized and laid out. So to answer your question, I guess simply is yes.
Yeah, people do put a lot more effort into the layout than I have today. I was more focused on kind of content, I suppose, than actually the layout or selling it that way. But
exactly, it's perfect because today we're diving into your workflow, whereas other scenarios might warrant like an entire experience. If there's a specific design that you're trying to sell or that you're trying to validate, then it might warrant a more of a presentation space. Yeah, what's up?
What's going on with it with the proportional grab sphere? I think there's this last update is meaning I can't grab the things quite as I'd like to. But
I can't see your sphere, unfortunately.
Yeah, but I'm trying to grab things, but it's not actually grabbing it.
Oh, is it just shrinking?
So like I explained, I like to grab things with the proportional grab sphere, and move my hand. Let me
try it myself.
I'm not actually. I've grabbed all these things, but actually this third point far away is moving a long way when actually it shouldn't be. So these 3 points here should be moving somewhat. There you go. That's behaving properly. It's quite hit or miss. Anyway, sorry, this is probably bad workman blaming his tools.
No worries.
So,
I mean, hey, if there's an issue, we want to know about it. So
yeah, that's fine. And actually, yeah, Gravity Sketch, you guys are really good. Okay, I'm not going to use the proportional move tool anymore. I have to try and break the habit. God, I've actually done that under pressure, and I've not done a very good job. The point is that on each one of these edges, there should be just 2 edge loops. And look, I've got 3 here, and so 3 is going to give a much crisper corner. But what the point is that we should actually be modeling things in quads as much as possible. Here, maybe I'll just leave the back of the fender there. And invariably you always go, but you're going to go back in and you're going to tweak the topology. But let me turn off this now. And actually, more often than not, I will actually do this work with the sub D turned off, because actually then you can, each one of these lines here needs to actually be following in along a nice progression and not have any kind of look. Yeah. If you've got like weird jagged things in it, it's actually gonna mess up your highlight. So yeah, and you've got this smoothing tool in here. It just comes to hand as like one button, one little gesture, and you got that tool, and it kind of just pulls stuff roughly into the location. So let's turn off sub D again. Okay, that's not particularly good.
Nick,
yeah,
from Dave Mucci.
Dave Mucci, how are you doing, Dave?
Yeah, he's asking, let's see, I'd be interested to hear how Nick's gone from Gravity Sketch to a usable part like the Light Fighter bodywork. So maybe you could just briefly bullet point, say again what your workflow is going from Gravity Sketch to like a physical part. Yeah,
so I mean, for that part, it was actually that was actually done. So I did the work in here, and then it was done. I handed it over to a friend of mine who then did the Alias work on that, and then he sent it over to Brian, who then did actually took those surfaces, and then because he's an engineer, he then actually I think modified those to actually attach, put mounting features and such like. I'm actually not entirely sure of the process he then used to go to production parts. I think he 3D printed the parts. I think I saw some photographs of 3D printed parts, and those were then, if I'm not mistaken, then used to make molds to then make carbon fiber parts from. Again, it's a low volume production thing, and so yeah, there's some room for error in it, and but yeah, so that's pretty much the process. But nowadays, I depending on the client, depending on the project, I would say we could do that stuff now, just refining the sub D mesh instead of actually taking it into Alias, which is quite it's where you're going to get really nice perfection. But if the subsequent process of like 3D printing and sanding and such like is then going to negate that work, it makes it somewhat pointless. So yeah, I mean, we're about time here, aren't we? And I'm sorry to say I'm not particularly proud of that, but let's.
Well, no, I would say this is you've definitely laid the groundwork and foundations. I think you've clearly shown, I think, like what goes into creating these surfaces based off the sketch. I think it's great.
Well, that's very nice of you to say so, Joan. But yeah, I mean, that's the point. Is you sketch things out, and you're not particularly. Oh man, I don't know what's going on here. Okay, you sketch things out, and the topology is not really very good. But actually, once you've got something that you really like, then you can kind of come back in and refine the topology. And actually, that topology really needs to be reflective of the design that you're trying to build. And actually, that topology is very useful when you send it out to Alias. So for example, so even if we mill this in clay, and then they actually we scan the clay, and then that's used as the final basis for doing the Class A modeling. If I also give the sub D version that I did, because that actually shows in it oh gosh, there's a poor example. Let's come with me, Jaron. We'll go back over to one which is not completely disgusting. You know, so for example, this one here, it shows the hang on, I'm just going to turn on the surface contours. You'll see that actually the kind of the surface contours actually follow the design intent, and so all of these edges are a pair of edge loops, and no more than a pair is absolutely necessary, unless you want to do a really crisp corner, in which case you can do 3. There is a creasing tool within Gravity Sketch, but unfortunately the creasing doesn't export. So I always encourage people to use the creasing tool only for trial and experimentation, but then actually to then go in and use just uncreased edge loops for your geometry.
I will say a little correction on that. I think at one point that was true, but I've actually been working on a project, and the creasing does export for sure. OBJ exports.
Oh, okay. Well, I stand corrected,
yeah.
and that's
It exports with render mesh.
Yeah.
But it won't export with the control mesh.
Good point. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. So
And
yeah,
so
but
if you
this
want
sort
to,
of-
if you're just rendering, it's good. It'll come out. But one thing to keep in mind is it's a 0 radius crease, meaning that it will, in renderings, it'll look kind of weird because it's a kind of, if you have like a change in direction, it'll be as sharp as like the edge of a knife. So in the rendering in like KeyShot or VRED or any program like that, it'll look a little off. The light will reflect a little bit weird because pretty much everything, even if it's pretty sharp, has a radius of some sort. And so just keep that in mind if you do use the creases in the render mesh. That's why you might have that. I use it. I'll just recommend using it to kind of put in place where you might need a sharp edge, and then going back in later on and adding edge loops and creating a small little fillet.
Yeah, great point, Nico.
Okay,
Thanks
cool.
for clarifying that.
Thank you for clarifying. Yeah, absolutely. Cool stuff.
Learning all the time.
That's about it. That's all I got, really, Jaron.
Beautiful. Well, let's hop out of we can hop out of VR then real quick then.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see. Switch here. Okay. Well, I just want to thank you, Nick, for coming today and for demoing just your entire workflow, basically the way you work, beginning to end, and going deep into the clay process and each of those steps like you did in the beginning. That was really, really informative. I learned a lot myself. Just trying to get my video back here. But
no, cool. That's great. I mean, I've really appreciated the opportunity to share that. And you know, if just one clay modeler now takes this up as a result, well, it probably won't have been worth it. But if it starts a movement, I'll be very happy. You know, if it starts people talking about it and even considering it, I think it will, you know, definitely have been worth it. So.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, people have been, I think, commenting in the chat the whole time too. I've been taking brief looks that, you know, it's just been so informative and helpful. And a lot of interaction on there. Any questions that we can maybe try and see if there's any that we couldn't get to. Yeah, it looks like we asked most of these actually, which is good. We got a lot of these covered. And thank you, Nico, for spotting those other questions as well and getting those. Again, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is going to be available after. So if you kind of joined in the middle, if you're joining late, or if you had to hop off, this will be available in a few days on our YouTube, and you'll be able to go watch the full thing there and review the workflows that Nick talked about today. Yeah, again, thank you. There's going to be a little survey at the end. If you could please fill that out afterwards, we'd really deeply appreciate it. I do want to throw up a quick poll. Let's see. And we had the clay modeler poll earlier. It looks like a lot of you are not, but that's okay. That's great.
Okay. But at least there are some. I think I was the only one for several webinars.
Yeah. And then we would be interested, now that we're pretty much at the end here, would you be interested in implementing this workflow into your current pipeline? So we'll just go ahead and put that out there just to get a temperature on what everybody thinks on that. And thank you for sticking with us at this point as well. We've got a little bit over time, but I think it's okay. It's all very informative. So, cool. Answers come in. All right. Okay, so half interested, half definitely will. So no no's. That's great.
Well, then that's got to be mission accomplished, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say so. Yeah, no, I just want to thank everybody for joining, and thank you again so much, Nick. I want to also thank Craig Dent for joining us. It was a pleasure having you and having your insights into, what it's been like for your journey as well. And
thank you, Craig. Thank you.
Any final words you want to say? It's open floor.
Let me say one thing. Grav.design training, if you want to learn it, I can teach you. I just dropped a one-day masterclass now. So I don't teach you how to use all the tools. You can learn that from the tutorials. And there's this one-day masterclass. And actually, I think it's pretty compelling. So yeah, go and check that out at the website. There's a lot more details there. And yeah, thank you, Craig. Thanks for coming.
Absolutely.
See you tomorrow.
See you on Gravity Sketch.
Amazing. Okay.
Well done, Nick.
Yes, well done. Well done.
Thank you all for coming.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody, and have a good one. And yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you.